Unspoken Issues.
Legions of the Unspoken, welcome to the Quick Stop with an Askew View. This is Chris Armstrong. Joining me for a look back at Clerks, the comic book. He's not even supposed to be here today. It's Al Sedano. How goes it, Al?
I swear, it's supposed to be my day off.
Yeah.
Somebody called out.
You can blame me.
He swore he was coming in. He swore. Clerks.
So we put up a poll. It's been, I guess about 6 months ago. It was in, I think, April or May that, and I'm not sure. Do you remember if there was a specific reason why we decided to do Clerks for the poll or for a Kevin Smith poll?
I do not recall.
It was probably just something I wanted to do. I can't really remember. But we put up Clerks, the comic book, which was the first, I believe that was the first Kevin Smith View Askew comic against Jay and Silent Bob #1. Do you know which one of those was first? Because I know Jay and Silent Bob, I guess they debuted in an Oni Press anthology, right?
I'm trying to remember that off the top of my head. But I mean, this might be the earliest because it's, 98?
Yeah. Yeah, I want to say there was a Jay and Silent Bob short story in like an Oni Press comic, and then they did Clerks, and then they did the Jay and Bob miniseries later. But I could be confusing some of that stuff. I'm not really 100% sure. It's been over 20 years. So, but Clerks, the comic book, got the win, 37% to 63%. So Clerks got 26 votes. Jay and Bob got 15. So fairly competitive. I was kind of pulling for the Clerks book just because it's a one-shot, and I think Jay and Silent Bob was a 4-part miniseries. So
okay, I'm looking up real quick. It might have came out around the same time because that was, or a little bit later, but not too much because it was also in 98 because it was called Chasing Dogma. Because it's supposed to be what happens to them between the movies Chasing Amy and Dogma.
Right.
So this might then be the first, but since it said it came out between from 98 to 99, that's probably the end of the year. So this probably is first.
Right. Yeah. I couldn't find, we often use Mike's Amazing World of Comics to find street dates and stuff like that. And I couldn't find a listing. There may be one, and I just wasn't able to find it for the Clerks comic book. So I got a February of 98 release date, but I'm not sure how accurate that is. A lot of times they're a few months ahead of time or whatever. So on the poll, we only had one comment, so I'll go ahead and address that now. Daryl Dar, he said, I watched the Jay and Silent Bob reboot last night. It actually washed the terrible taste of Birds of Prey out of my mouth. I don't really have much to say about Birds of Prey. I mean, other than that I've seen it. It was fine, I guess.
I haven't yet, so I can't say anything good or bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's all right. I don't think it's terrible, but it's nothing I'm going to rush to watch again. Did you see the reboot, the Jay and Silent Bob reboot?
I have not had a chance to yet.
Yeah, I actually was able to go see it on one of the theatrical releases. They did a Fathom Events thing in different theaters around the country.
Oh, nice.
And my local theater here didn't get one, but one about 2 towns over, about an hour away, had it. So me and a buddy of mine drove out there and watched it, and it's pretty good. I mean, I'm a big Kevin Smith fan. I like pretty much all of his movies. Yoga Hosers, I'm not a big fan of, really. There's a few that I'm not huge on. For what it was, I enjoyed the Jay and Silent Bob reboot. It's not one that I'll probably watch over and over again, but I did buy the Blu-ray when it came out. So it had several chuckles in there, so I was satisfied with it overall. But before we get into the actual meat of the issue, what's your history with Kevin Smith? We had talked before. Now that, because Jesse Starcher, who normally hosts the podcast here with me, because of everything going on with COVID, he's been covered up with work the last few months. So Evan Bevins and you have kind of jumped in to help me with a lot of these Unspoken Issues episodes. Evan wasn't really interested in Kevin Smith, but you were when I broached the subject with you guys. So tell me a little bit about your history with Kevin Smith and his filmography and comics and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, well, it goes back to pretty much the beginning because remember, I'm from Jersey.
Yeah,
I was still living there, and in fact, where I lived in Middlesex County was only basically a few towns over from where he's based. Mm-hmm. For Red Bank. So I don't remember exactly when I saw it, but I know I already had seen Clerks when I saw Mallrats, and I saw Mallrats in the theater when it first came out. Mm-hmm. So I must have somehow found out about it and saw it on probably VHS shortly after it was released. And basically, I saw every movie up until Red State, which was the last one I was able to see, all of them in the theaters when they first came out.
Awesome.
So yeah, Red State. My wife and I went to see that at in New York City at the Radio City Music Hall, where he was doing
very
Q&A
cool.
with it.
Awesome. So that was when he was taking it as like a road show?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, he was doing it. He was doing a live thing, and that's when he was in New York. So we got tickets, went to the city because we were still living up in Jersey at the time. And so yeah, I saw them all when they came out. I caught the 2 episodes of the Clerks animated series when they were on TV. I've seen all of them since then, all 6 episodes. But at the time, they only released 2 episodes of the animated series on TV.
Yeah, I had those on a VHS that I kind of wore out. I love that. I love that show. I watched the entire, which you can watch the whole series, in 2 hours because there's only
6.
But I watched that about once a year. I'll put the DVD on and watch them all. I think that show was kind of brilliant, and it's kind of disappointing that's all we ever got out of it. But
but it was fun. But yeah, so I did read most of the comics that came out, and both the ones he wrote for the companies and the ones like this, like the Clerk, the ones that were based on the movies.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, no, I was a fan of all that stuff. It just recently, with as time goes on, especially as I've not been able to watch them right away, I kind of forget to go look for them.
Right.
So, although the other for reading this, I was thinking like, you know what, I might have to go dig out DVDs or buy the ones I don't have and just do a rewatch soon of all the stuff.
Mm.
Start with Clerks and work my way up and then watch Reboot after watching all the other ones.
Yeah, that's kind of I kind of did that when he had he had the heart attack. I guess maybe 2.5, 3 years ago now. It's been a little while, but when that happened,
oh yeah, that's right.
Like I know when I follow a lot of horror people on Twitter and stuff like that, and like horror fans and stuff like that. So whenever Toby Hooper or Wes Craven died, I'd see a lot of people on Twitter talking about how they would get emotional about it and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, I like those guys, but I don't know. That almost seems a little too serious to me for somebody that you never met or whatever. But when that happened with Kevin Smith, I was like, I think I would probably be, a little bit emotional because he's a filmmaker that I really connected with when I was, in my late teens and stuff. So it kind of made me realize what they were kind of talking about a little bit. So when that happened, I went back and rewatched all of his movies a couple of years ago. So it kind of made me realize a little bit more what they were talking about with that stuff.
Yeah, and actually, I just almost forgot. That's right. He was actually also one of the first podcasts I listened to when he came out with Smodcast. I was listening to that within the first 6 months or so it came out. I found out about it and started listening. So it's one of the first podcasts I listened to. In fact, I remember when I was living down by South Jersey, and I'm listening to one of the more recent episodes, and he's talking about doing shows, and he mentions Philly. I'm like, wait a minute. And I looked it up. I was like, it's tonight. And I bought a ticket and went there to see it, right after work. I was like, oh, very cool. I can afford this. And I just shot over to Philly because where I was living was right across the bridge.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. He, his Evening with Kevin Smith DVDs kind of laid the groundwork for when the podcast thing really took off. It was well, this is perfect for him because, those Q&As are kind of legendary.
Oh, yeah. They're not even very much Q's. There's a Q and an A because it's 2 questions. And
yeah.
It goes an hour and a half.
Right. Yeah. The original DVD for that, the Prince story and the Tim Burton stories are just I can put those on YouTube occasionally and just watch those. And it's kind of similar to the Chappelle Show Hollywood Story sketches. They're kind of the same. Those feel like kind of the same thing to me. I can watch those over and over again.
Yeah, and when things get back to normal, I would love one day to take a vacation out to LA and go see Babylon live.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah, yeah. My a buddy, the buddy of mine that went to see Reboot with me. We've talked for a few years now about going up to Red Bank just to go to the Secret Stash because we've never been, and you never know how much longer that place is gonna be there. Comic shops are closing left and right, and I'm sure it's probably the most famous comic shop in the world, really. But yeah. It's in a small town. There's no guarantee that it's going to be there forever. So
no, it's a small town, but Red Bank is definitely a town that does have a bit of things like that, little off-kilter stores. I mean, granted, a lot of them have shut down. Last time I went up to Jersey to visit, there was a lot of stuff shut down at Red Bank. But on the other hand, they had the TV show for a couple of years, so it depends how much money is devoted to keeping the store afloat. And he's pretty, I'm not saying he's a perfect person, but he seems to be pretty faithful to the people in his life. So I have a feeling he would do everything he can to keep it going for Walt and the rest. As long as he could, he would keep that going probably.
Yeah, and a shout out to Walt and Brian Johnson too, because I listen to Smodcast occasionally. I don't listen to it like religiously, but I do listen to Tell 'em Steve Dave every week, the podcast that Q from Impractical Jokers and Walt and Brian Johnson have. That's still one that I listen to pretty much every week.
Oh yeah, one thing is the driving scene from Clerks 2.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where they're driving, especially when they're driving to go to the go-karts.
Yeah,
that's Route 30. That's 34, which was basically the road I would take to go to where my wife was living at the time.
Oh, that's cool.
Dating. But the fun thing is, it's watching it. I remember the first time she's like, "How did they cut this? Because like those things are not in that order."
Movie magic.
But yeah, that evil clown sign. Yep, I remember passing that all the time.
Just real quickly, I'll go back to like to my kind of history with Kevin Smith and the View Askew stuff. I was in high school. 94 was when Clerks came out, so I was 14. And I remember seeing Siskel and Ebert do like a review, because I would watch Siskel and Ebert pretty regularly before I'd go to bed or whatever. I think it was on Sunday nights maybe. And I remember seeing them talk about Clerks, and I thought it was really cool, like Clerks and Desperado, the Robert Rodriguez, not Desperado, El Mariachi. So there was a lot of talk about like the indie guys that were, you know, basically raising their own money to make these indie movies. And I thought that was cool, but I kind of forgot about it. And then a friend of mine at school knew that I was into comics, and he was like, "Hey, have you seen this Mallrats movie?" And I was like, "No, I remember seeing ads for it and stuff, but I never watched it, because I mean, it was only in theaters, you know, really briefly."
Yeah.
So he let me borrow it, and it was like a religious experience. And I watched it over and I can watch Mallrats now, and I can see like the flaws, but everything to do with Brody Bruce is, you know, Jason Lee as Brody Bruce is like maybe my favorite movie character of all time. So I still love that movie. So I kind of fell in love with his movies, and then I watched Chasing Amy, because I think it was already out at that point, but that's when I kind of caught up, and from that point on, I was on top of like Dogma and Jay and Bob when it came out, and when he transitioned to doing like comics, you know, I love the Daredevil and Green Arrow stuff. Batman, his Batman run, not as much, although I don't think it's as bad as some people, some of the detractors seem to think. But I'm a big fan. Some of those movies haven't aged quite as well, like Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. Like, it's just a series of. It's a road movie with a series of like in jokes and gags. That's kind of how Reboot is too. But for me, it works because I know all the in jokes and all the gags work really well.
Yeah, that's what it's made for. Basically, it's like a greatest hits thing.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, I remember. Mallrats was out so briefly, but I remember going there and remember seeing the Route 1 flea market, the one where they go to after the mall, where they see the fortune teller. I remember going to that place. That was such a horrible little flea market. I mean, it was really crappy. But for me, that was probably part of it. Was just knowing places there. Right? Like, I could go to places. You know, I've been to places in those movies. So for me, I was like, "Oh, that's new."
Yeah, a few years ago, these guys made a horror movie here in the area where I'm from, and mostly it was like out in the backwoods and stuff. But there was a scene in a bar that I used to go to kind of frequently, and I was like, "Oh, that's kind of cool." Which, I mean, it was. I think it's on like Tubi and stuff now, but it was like. It's not like a big movie or anything, but it was just kind of cool to see that stuff like in a movie. Cool. Yeah,
that's always fun to have something less local, and you're like, I know that place. It's not just that like you could go there. It's like I've been there. I've been there just on a regular basis. I drive down that road all the time.
Well, all right. Well, let's jump into this actual Clerks the comic book. Just a little heads up. This is a Kevin Smith book, so obviously it's pretty. Blue. There's a lot of, Kevin Smith is known for his potty mouth, basically.
He likes the bad words.
Yeah. So I mean, it may not it's probably not going to get too bad, but I just wanted to throw out like a heads up out there. But I'll do a brief synopsis, and then we'll kind of dig into the actual meat of the comic. So Clerks, the comic book, written by Kevin Smith, illustrated by Jim Mahfood, cover by Gilbert Hernandez, published by Oni Press in February 1998. On the heels of the recently released Star Wars Special Edition films, Randall convinces his best friend Dante that investing in hard-to-acquire Chase Star Wars action figures could be a way to earn extra cash. After discovering a shady black market toy ring, the pair make a tidy profit and show up Randall's comic shop running enemies in the process. But when merry mischief makers Jay and Silent Bob see their drug sales sag due to the toy boom in Red Bank, they sabotage said black market, leaving Dante and Randall back at their day jobs where they belong. So that's kind of the brief overview.
Most Kevin Smith things, the plot is very short. It's all about the dialogue and the character interaction and the minutia.
Right.
It's like it's not much different than like saying the plot of giving the plot of Mallrats. Two guys go to the mall to waste time and try to figure out how to win back his girlfriend.
Yeah, exactly.
Chaos ensues.
They open up in a comic shop, and Randall Graves is there. I don't think they mentioned Randall having any kind of comic book fandom in the Clerks movie, but here he's buying comics, and there's also a cool reference. Steve Dave basically says, I hate that guy. Sorry?
It's their store, yeah.
Right. It's Walt and Steve Dave's comic shop, and as Randall takes off, Steve Dave mentions, I hate that guy and that cousin of his, which I think that may be the first mention or reference to the fact that Randall and Brody are cousins. Although I guess in Mallrats Brody mentions his cousin Walt, and Randall mentions his cousin Walt in the Clerks. So maybe that's the first reference, but another reference to that, which was kind of cool. But anything stand out from the intro? Comic shop scene?
Well, of course, there's the amusement of the handless Luke action figure. The first panel with the picture of Luke screaming with the hand missing.
Yeah.
And the little tongue-in-cheek, I'm not sure it's a playful jab or mean jab. I haven't heard anything about him liking or not liking this person, but his jab at Peter David's run of Aquaman.
Yeah, that was interesting. It makes me think that there was something to do that, but maybe I'm thinking of his little mini rivalry with Alex Ross. I know Alex Ross and Kevin Smith traded barbs at one time in Wizard magazine at one point. So I'm not sure if there was ever anything with Peter David, but yeah. And I wasn't 100% sure if that was Peter David they were talking about.
Oh yeah.
Because I didn't recall him having an Aquaman run, although I knew it. I could tell from the references to the Hulk that was probably who they were talking about.
Oh yeah. That was a whole Aquaman run from the 90s where he lost his hand.
Okay.
And had the harpoon. Yeah, that was Peter David writing it. And then because also he mentions the thing, because remember, he had that famous debate with Todd McFarlane. And in here, they kind of reference that, although they change it up because they say, as Steve Day says, not to mention how he tears jerks like that guy who craps out the Savage Lizard a new asshole every week. Now, of course, he's obviously talking about Eric Larson because he does the Savage Dragon, and it was McFarlane. But again, he's changing things a little bit, obviously.
Right.
Although maybe he had an issue with Larson. I don't know. So the funny thing is actually that Larson was the writer. Yeah, Larson was the writer after Peter David on Aquaman for a year.
Right. I remember that run. I didn't read the Peter David stuff, but I remember Larson being on there. That debate with McFarlane and Peter David is apparently on YouTube now. I've intended to go and watch it. I found it on there a few times, but I've never actually watched the actual video.
Yeah. So that was kind of a little flashback, bring me back to that time period.
So we kind of moved from that to Randall showing up late to the video store, which is I guess midday. It's still closed. Much like in the movie, he's definitely not worried about getting there on time. But I enjoyed the opening where there's two guys waiting for Randall to open the store, and I mean they're on the verge of just physically assaulting him, and he mentions, "Hey, I've got a copy of Mighty Ducks 9 under the counter for the customer who pleases me," basically. So he convinces them to have a out and out brawl in front of the shop.
Yeah, it's a stupid little thing, and it keeps going on. It's like your shirts, your skins, and then later on you see Jay and Bob handing the two guys pieces of wood to beat each other with. Yeah,
that was my favorite part of the gag is when they cut back to them and Jay and Bob have provided them weapons to go at it with.
Yeah, this whole thing I was thinking as I read this, this could have been an episode of the animated series.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking as I was reading it, and which it helps that Jim Mayfood has got a pretty kind of an indie comics / animated style, cartoony style. It really lends itself to that kind of a feel. But as I'm reading the characters interacting, I hear them more in the animated series, their voices in more in the animated series style than I do even the movies, even though this predates the animated series.
Yeah. Yeah, and that, by the way, it's funny how you go back and look at something and you realize how it influenced you. Because when he talks about the Mighty Ducks 9 that I have waiting for you, and the guy says, "Emilio in a dress?" I've made those kind of jokes I made that joke about Mighty Ducks. I'm like, oh yeah, there's Mighty Ducks 8, 9, Mighty Ducks, Emilio in a dress, blah, blah, blah. I've made that joke and I never realized this is where I got it from.
Yeah, that happens to me a lot when I go back and watch like news radio, other shows and movies I watched a lot when I was a kid that I haven't seen in a while. And I'm like, oh, I make those references without even knowing that I'm doing it. It's just part of my vernacular now.
Yeah.
And that just is stuff you kind of pick up on as you revisit stuff from your childhood a lot of times.
But yeah, no, and like you said about the art, I like Mahfoud. I have a lot of his stuff. I like his work. And I like all the little details he puts in the background. All the little posters, or like all the little, like you go back to the comic store, all the little comics he has in there on the background.
Yeah, I think the Clerks. I think Mayfood did this and the Clerks Holiday Special comic, and those may be the only things I've read. I know he did the comic called Girl Scouts. It was a kind of a big deal.
Yeah, I have those. Those are fun. Cool. And he also did the Generation X Underground Special, which is like an indie version of Gen X, Generation X, the Marvel comic.
You know, I may have actually had that too. Although I wasn't a Generation X reader, for some reason that sticks out in my mind that maybe I had that at that time too.
And then he's just done a bunch of just self-published indie books, usually under the title like 40 Ounce Collected. There was one book called The Dog That Makes Peanut Butter Sandwiches.
Was his stuff at Oni Press a lot?
Yeah, it's a lot. Oni published a lot of his stuff. It's very kind of this kind of style, very funky, very hip hop, 90s hip hop influenced style. Very eclectic, very out there.
Yeah, I mean, it is like, maybe I'm associating it with these Clerks comics, but yeah, it looks, when I think of indie 90s comics, this is the kind of art style that pops in my head for sure.
Yeah.
There's also, after the Dante and Randall make it inside the Quick Stop, there's a little kind of a reference to the movie where Dante finds an expired milk from November '91, so it would have been 7 years expired by that point. And I thought it was odd, like, I guess it might have been a Mayfood contribution, but like he just pours it in the trash can outside. Like, you don't want to pour that in the sink. Why is the milk going in the trash can? I just thought that was odd.
He doesn't want to smell it, I guess.
Yeah, that could be too. But yeah, so Randall at the comic shop had seen that Walt and Steve David had some jacked up prices on some Star Wars figures, which leads now to Randall. He's got a copy of a toy price guide. He's thumbing through and seeing how expensive some of these rare Star Wars figures are. And it leads to a pretty cool discussion of Star Wars between Dante and Randall, which is another Clerks thing from the film. There was a lot of Star Wars talk in the original Clerks movie. I guess both Clerks movies. And it was kind of cool seeing this through a modern lens, because like this is the time when there were only 3 Star Wars movies. The prequels hadn't come out yet. The Disney stuff hadn't happened yet. And there were no TV shows. So it's just the original trilogy, and this is right after the special edition movies had come out.
Yeah, it's kind of weird thinking of that. It's like, oh yeah, this is when there's only the 3 movies, not 9. I mean, if you wanted expanded Star Wars TV wise, not books or anything, but like to watch, you only had either the cartoons. The Ewoks or
Ewoks and droids, yeah.
If you could find them, because this is '98, it's not like they were available on DVD readily. You'd have to like have tapes of them, or those 2 Ewok TV movies,
right? Caravan of Courage, and I forget what the other one was called, but
I think it was just called the Ewok movie.
Okay,
and or if you were really desperate, the Holiday Special.
Ooh, yeah, we discussed that on the source material episode we did on Marvel Star Wars. That Holiday Special. Whew.
Was Troops out yet? I'm trying to remember.
Sorry?
Troops, was that out yet? Have you seen that?
98, yeah.
97, it came out. Okay, so
it was out by then. Yeah, I don't know. I probably had not seen it yet. I'll bet I didn't see it until like 2000 or 2001.
Oh, yeah, same thing here. But yeah, it was at least out. But again, that was an indie, a fan film. You had to go looking for that, and there was no YouTube.
Yep.
Real quick, for anyone who doesn't know, it's basically a short little like mockumentary film. Basically, instead of cops, it was stormtroopers. And it was supposed to be, they're investigating, they're on Tatooine, so they're like, looking at where Luke's family got killed and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really, and it's. I rewatched it again, probably less than a year ago, and it's still really funny. And the guy who made Troops did the Tag and Bink Star Wars comic, which are really fun.
Oh, I've read those. Yeah, those are fun. Yeah, Kevin Rubio.
Right. Yeah. And, in that Mandalorian episode from the season finale from last season, so they have the 2 stormtroopers the 2 scout troopers that have, kidnapped Baby Yoda at the beginning of the last episode.
Oh, yeah.
and it's Jason Sudeikis and some other comedic actor. I forget who. But I was like, man, I wish they had just called them Tag and Bink. That would have been perfect.
I didn't realize that was. I didn't look up to see who it was.
Yeah, I didn't recognize the voices or anything, but I saw somewhere that Sudeikis had done like an interview where he talked. It was like a surprise thing where it wasn't like announced he was going to be in it or whatever. And I think I might have missed pointing out. I think it might have been outside of the comic shop. Actually, we haven't got there yet.
Okay.
There's a cameo from Banky from Chasing Amy at some point outside of the mall, I think, or one of the stores.
And I'm fairly certain, actually, when they're in the store just after Dante dumps out the milk, and Randall's trying to convince him to go in with him on this whole scheme.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, not everyone cares about Star Wars. And he looks at the two people at the counter and says, what can I help you with? And they ask, do you have Star Wars cards? And that one of them, whether he's reusing the face or it's supposed to be them, the girl, it looks definitely like one of the Girl Scouts.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would imagine that's probably the case, yeah. With the different color hair,
Yeah.
Kind of like, yeah,
that looks just like one of them. I want to say Gwen, maybe, but I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I wouldn't have recognized that, but that sounds, and like I said, I've never read those, but I've seen like images and stuff, so I think you're probably right on for that.
But yeah, that was. I like that. He's talking Star Wars like it's the one constant in the world that keeps it from falling into chaos and anarchy. Star Wars.
I mean, honestly, that's how I felt at the time. I was, I guess, 17, 18 when this came out, and I was still watching Star Wars, on VHS over and over again.
It does kind of fit in with what he's talking about later on in Clerks 2. He's like, "There's only return and it's of the Jedi."
Yeah, and like you said in the Star Wars cards gag, there's a great middle panel of silence where Randall is just kind of grinning to himself about.
Yeah, he has a big smile.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things that Mayfu does is like the facial expressions and stuff like that in some of these silent panels and stuff that work really well. But so yeah, Randall has kind of decided whether even without Dante's blessing that he's going to invest in some of these toys. He ends up at Pricey Toys, which I believe Buy Me Toys was mentioned in Clerks, right?
I don't recall.
I'm not 100% sure, but I believe Buy Me Toys was already mentioned in a previous Kevin Smith thing, but he ends up maybe it was in Mallrats even. Maybe that was the name of the toy store in Mallrats. But in this mall, it's Pricey Toys is the name of the toy store he ends up at.
Oh, there's Brody on that top panel where it says above where you see the entrance for Pricey Toys, where you see the top panel where it says later, you see the mall.
Right. Yeah.
And there's one girl sticking her tongue out at Brody, who's holding a Blunt Man and Chronic comic.
Well, I think that's Banky.
Banky, sorry, wrong one.
From Chasing Amy,
wrong Jason Lee.
Right. Which you could kind of say they're the same character. They're pretty similar. And I was curious if the other characters were supposed to be like if that was supposed to be Alyssa Jones in the foreground or whatnot. But it's hard to tell. Banky's got a really specific, he got the beard and the backwards baseball cap, stuff like that.
And then the fact he's holding the comic.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a feeling he's trying to use that to get a date. Yeah,
that looks exactly like what he's like, hey, I drew this, or I was the inker on this.
And that's why she's sticking her tongue at him. It's like, yeah, go away. Please stop bothering me. I'm done with this. Is the response I will give you, and that is it. Enjoy it.
But Randall is at Pricey Toys trying to find some of these hot action figures, and he can only find basically the ones that are overstocked. Everybody's got, the easy access to all these, but the chase figures are something that he needs to get to actually make a little money. And I'd never heard of, I'm really not a toy collector even now, and I definitely wasn't then. So the concept of chase figures was something that I was completely unfamiliar with until this came out. And do you know anything about it? Because it seems like that is actually the way it works. Like there are chase figures out there that are like 1-2 a box that people have to track down. Yep.
No, I was working part-time at a comic store at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So we were getting the boxes of stuff. Like you would get, when you get the cases in there, we would see what would be in there and be like, yeah, you get like 4 of this, 4 each of the one thing, 3 each of these other ones, and like 1 of something else. Because we would already do pre-sales of like, okay, who wants a full set? And they would get, they would be like 1 full set per case because half the time there would be like 1 of those chase figures per case. And also this reminds me, because I know from listening to like Smodcast that one of the things he did when he was trying to keep Jay, I think it was when Jay was trying to get off heroin, when he was on methadone. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the things he would do with him was that they would go to some of these stores and be there like really early before they would open, waiting for them to open so they can go in there and try and grab the toys. to sell to the comic store before, they sold out, before like Target or whatever main store sold out of the Chase figures. So I have to wonder if that was part of the genesis of this story.
So would that have been, that would have been in the 90s then. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, so I can't remember exactly when that happened, but I think it was around this time because it was definitely when they were both living in Jersey.
Yeah.
So before he moved to California. So I think it was about this time, maybe before. So that's my guess, at least.
Sure. And there was also there's a story on Tell 'em Steve Dave, the Walt Flanagan, Brian Johnson podcast, where they talk about a scam that Walt and I think Sunday Jeff is the other guy that was doing it, that works at the stash, where they would basically go to Suncoast. I don't remember the exact scam they had going, but they would basically, if I remember right, they would go to Suncoast and they would buy the cheap figures, or maybe the figures that weren't really worth as much, and then they would sell. Now I'm getting confused on how it worked. So I don't want to go into too many of the details, but they basically had some scam going with Suncoast, like back in, I guess, the early 2000s. And they still reference it from time to time on the Tell 'em Steve Dave podcast.
But I do like how this whole thing goes with all of a sudden now Randall, the shoe's on the other foot, and now Randall's the unthinking customer. And
when it hits him, when he realizes what's going on, like that he's the victim of the two clerks, it's just his world collapses around him, basically.
Yeah. That great panel where they're all laughing at him and his eyes is just completely black. He's like, what's going on? But this is obviously a big parody of what actually does happen. But yeah, something similar to this probably happened.
Right. Yeah. I want to even say that a friend of mine had like a hookup at a Toys R Us here in town, like years ago, who was into like collecting action figures, and he would get like, the guy would like hold the good stuff for him basically, and he would go in at his convenience and pick it up. So
this happened in plenty of places, especially if there was a secondary market that would buy the figures for, that would sell them for a lot higher. And these stores are just going to sell no matter what they get. They're just going to sell for the regular price anyway. So, if you're working in the stock room, you can make a few extra bucks.
Right.
You wouldn't become you wouldn't go anywhere as crazy as what happens in this issue, but that's the whole point of this.
Sure.
The parody.
So I guess Randall, I'm not sure where he gets the scoop on the Buy Me Toys, the black market, but he convinces Dante to try and appease this guy who's works the stock room essentially at Buy Me Toys, and they show up and there's a huge crowd of nerds trying to get these Chase figures, and there's essentially like a 17-year-old nerd that works there that
he set himself up like a king on the loading dock.
Yeah, he's got a
throw.
Exactly, a big throne. He's got a couple of brutish minions kind of keeping track of things, making sure everything stays orderly. And at one point, a guy comes up to him. He's basically taking offers for these figures, and a guy approaches with a handful of cash, and he gives the nod, and one of the minions gives the kid whatever figure he's looking for, and another guy approaches with like a couple of cartons of cigarettes as like an offering, and the kid gives the go ahead to just beat the shit out of this guy. Like he's not satisfied with the cartons of cigarettes. So, and when Dante sees that, he's like, all right, let's get out of here. This is too much.
And I like how Randall convinces him, not for what he can give him, which is the videos, but he's like, I want to crush my enemies.
Yeah.
He does the Conan line, crush my enemies, see them driven before me, and hear the lamentation of their women. I like this. Go on.
I was going to say, Dante's doing this for money, basically. He mentioned earlier in the comic that he was looking for a second job, but it kind of seems like at this point you get the gist that like Randall doesn't really care as much about the money as he wants to embarrass and get and one up the clerks at the comic shop that he hates so much, and once the nerd in charge here realizes that's kind of his goal, it pleases him. So
it brings life back to his old heart. Like he's 17.
Yeah. Yeah, the exasperated Dante is one of the best parts of this scene, where he's just kind of in the background, kind of observing how absurd everything is that's going on here.
Yeah, it's like it's like, you people are crazy. It's basically the Dante character again, like I said, from the cartoon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's the straight man while Randall's doing the crazy stuff. He's like, they're going, what's wrong with you? And so they make their money. They bring the stuff to the store, and everyone's going out. I love how everyone's like a mob of people rushing the store.
Yeah, Steve, Dave, and Walt are bemused at like why are they not moving their action figures, and they see like a rush of people run by, kind of like I mean it's very similar to in the Clerks animated series when everybody's rushing to Leonardo's new quicker stop,
Yes.
So they follow the rush back to the RST video where they see Randall has gotten cornered the market on these chase figures or whatever.
Even though they have anatomically correct Jabba, go figure, it's still not selling. I love the toys that he comes up with.
Yeah, some of the topless Mon Mothma, and some of these obviously they would never, even before Disney, they would never happen. But no. In an indie Clerks comic, it's fair game.
Oh god, yeah. Yeah, it's the marketing. It's like we'll sell everything, whatever we can do, doesn't matter.
And even Jay is pissed that all these kids, instead of buying weed, they're buying toys now. And,
what's their priorities?
Right. And he catches Silent Bob with a Leia Porkin Ewok figure, which is the look on the Ewok's face is pretty priceless.
Yes, it's like that's it. We're doing something about this.
So kind of at the tail end here, Randall makes it back or heads back with some of their profits to buy more toys. And did they ever name this Weasley nerd? I can't remember if they ever.
I don't think so. I think he's
just the dealer, I guess.
Yeah.
And once Randall makes it back,
Howell.
Dealer.
I went back a bit. They call him Lord Howell.
Lord Howell, okay. So Lord Howell reveals that, hey, your enemies have come here to beg for toys, so
let's enjoy
basically watch them grovel for your pleasure, basically.
And I like how they're enjoying it until he takes it a bit too far.
Right. And actually, even before that, Randall's like just overjoyed. Like, does it get any better than this? Talking to Dante, and Dante's like, maybe this is going a little bit too far. Like, again, the absurdity is not lost on Dante. But yeah, basically, Steve Dave, offers up some cash, and when he realizes that's not going to probably cut it, he basically offers up Walt as a sex doll for Lord Howell.
Yeah, and I like that last panel. I believe that's our cue to cut out of here.
And finally, Randall agrees. Finally, that's the last straw. That's enough. He doesn't want to watch Walt be assaulted. So
until
yeah, before anything more can happen other than some unbuckling, Jay and Silent Bob have stolen the truck with all the Star Wars toys and basically sell them for, I guess, 3 for $5 or something like that.
Yeah.
Basically as cheap as possible, just to get them, just to flood the market and basically ruin Lord Howell's whole operation.
Which is impressive planning for Jay.
Yeah, I gotta think that's was Silent Bob's plan. I'm just gonna assume. I don't know.
Well, occasionally Jay has a light bulb. Stop clock, blind squirrel.
Yeah,
that thing.
And Lord Howell basically, once he sees his empire has crumbled around him, is like, hey, we're still friends though, right, Randall? And Randall has no patience for it, just shoves him to the side, and he and Dante head back to their previous existence.
Yeah, they go to spend all the money on a late night dinner at the diner. Because that's probably, that's why they need a second job, is because what do they do when they, because Dante says, hey, look at it this way. We made $300 and we didn't lose anything, including dignity. So, because as Randall says to Walt, when Walt says, at least I have to do anything to you, he's like, yes, but you would have, and you get to live with that. So, Dante's like, hey, we got out, we made $300 and we didn't have to lose anything. And it's like, hey, let's go to the diner, spend all the money at an expensive late night dinner.
That's kind of perfect for, an early 20s couple of slackers.
Oh, yeah, I would have done that with my friends. Are you kidding?
We didn't have any cool diners here, so it was Steak and Shake for me and my friends when I was in my late teens, early 20s. That was the place that was open all night that we would hang out at.
Yeah. No, there were plenty of a lot of them have closed or gone to the point where now they close at night. But yeah, back then, most of the diners in Jersey were 24 hours.
Sounds pretty awesome, actually.
So you could still go there at 2 a.m. and get stuff.
Yeah, around here it's just like, there's Waffle House and stuff like that. Now IHOP, like it's all chain places and stuff like that as far as like 24-hour eateries and stuff like that. So
yeah, most are small ones. The only thing that was near me, at least in my area, that was chain that was open late was Denny's.
Right. Yeah. We had a Denny's when I was younger. We haven't had one in a while, but
there was all the diners that you could go to, and White Castle. But they weren't open 24 hours, but they were, or maybe they were. I forget. But
a lot of White Castles are open like drive-through 24 hours. I know
they might have been. Just like we spent a lot of time, like 1, 2 in the morning at White Castle parking lots.
We've never had a White Castle here, but we at one time had 2 Crystals, which is essentially the same as White Castle. And
you get the sack.
Yeah, but like those were only open here for a couple of years, and they both closed down. And that was like 20 years ago. So we haven't had either one of those since then. Like, we didn't know how good we had it. We had 2 Crystals, and now they're both gone. And I can only get White Castle or Crystal if I go out of town now.
Yeah, that was the one thing that drove me nuts about, oh God, what's the White Castle movie?
Harold and Kumar, yeah.
That's it, Harold and Kumar. I was like, there's no White Castle in Cherry Hill. There's one right in Sayreville. What the hell's wrong with you people? You have to go all the way down to Cherry Hill? My God, what's wrong with you?
They didn't do the research.
Nope.
So, that's pretty much the gist of the plot. Any last thoughts on the overall issue?
No, this is fun. I mean, yes, there's 1 or 2 lines that are a little troubling now.
Sure,
but I mean, still, it's an amusing story. It's fun. It's like I said, it's very much like an episode of the cartoon. It's not the movie. You would expect this to be. This would not work as a movie, but for an episode of the animated series, this would have been perfect. And this was a nice pairing because Kevin Smith, of course, with the dialogue and everything, and there's plenty of dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
If you have Mark Ruffalo, this human, like, how many words are there?
Yeah, I mean, it took me a good like half an hour to read this thing, which is not a standard 22 issue comic. I think it's probably closer to like 35.
It's 32.
Like 35 pages or so. But
yeah, look at the last page. It's 32 pages.
Okay, yeah. So it took a good half hour to get through it. So
yeah, but also the combination is a good artist for him because Jim Mahfood has a good sense of storytelling, but he also does these great little visual gags, both in the background and with the characters. So it really sells the story.
Yeah, pretty much. I think you pretty much nailed it. I'm a huge the Clerks animated series may be my favorite Kevin Smith thing. Mallrats probably is because of like the nostalgia that is involved with it. But if I'm going to go back and watch anything now that I think holds up as well as anything else that he's ever done, which the animated series was a collaborative thing with a lot of different writers and stuff. But I think that Clerks, the animated series, is probably the thing that is the most accessible and easiest to, and like just the most rewatchable thing that in the View Askew, pantheon or whatever. So yeah, this definitely feels like a Clerks animated episode, and most of the other Clerks comics do as well. There's later in this year, I think he did the holiday special, and then they did Clerks The Lost Scene, which was later animated on the Clerks X DVD, which is pretty cool. And then there was a Clerks 2 comic as well when the Clerks 2 movie came out. So big fan. I thought it was really cool. Did you have a favorite gag or favorite page, panel, whatever, in this issue?
It's probably Jay and Bob fighting over the figure, the Ewok figure.
Okay. Yeah. I think mine might be just the sequence where the guys are fighting outside and Jay and Bob hand them 2x4s to fight with, which is
that's great too. Yeah, and then verbally, dialogue wise, the whole sequence of the customer asking, Dante's telling him it's $14.83, and the guy has like he's $7 short, and the guy's like, "Don't you have one of those give $1, take $1 bolts?" He's like, "No, I have a give a penny, take a penny. There's four pennies. You got to put some stuff back." And the guy comes back like half a page later. He's like, "I put back a pack of gum. How much is it now?"
Yeah, that whole sequence really feels like something that would have been in the movie. Like that, it almost seems like a deleted scene. That's really how the customer interactions in the Clerks film kind of went. So that was a cool throwback to that.
Oh yeah, it's like 2 pages later. Great. They have that whole thing with the milk and the whole, another customer comes in, and then at the end, it's like, they put back a pack of gum. Now how much is it?
All that time, all he could part with, he would spend all that time deciding what to put back, and it was just back gum. Yeah. But yeah, pretty cool issue. I still like these View Askew comics quite a bit, despite some of the dated stuff in them as far as like stuff you couldn't get away with now or whatever. But I still enjoy them quite a bit. Anything else before we get to plugs?
I don't think so. I had fun with this. I mean, like you said, it took a half hour to read it because it took me at least a little longer than that. But because you have like a couple different gags here, pages of like, you have a couple pages here for these gags in the store and then a couple pages of them at the place. So it's not like, at least for me, I wasn't reading it going, oh God, is this over yet?
Right. And thanks to my food, there's a lot of pages you want to kind of pour over each panel and like spot all the gags in the background and stuff like that. So
like, I just realized in the store behind it's behind the counter. I'm looking at the candy and it's KY jelly. And then there's also Crack Rock.
Oh wow. I didn't pick that
page
up.
Page 8. This is page 8, panel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, panel 6.
Oh, okay. I see behind Randall. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Next to the payphone. Okay, cool. Yeah.
I'm reading it digitally, so I'll be able to expand the page.
There's also Bud at the bottom, it looks like. So.
Yeah, I just realized.
Not Budweiser.
No, it's in a little baggie. So
yeah.
I'm surprised Jay didn't get mad at them for cutting in his profits.
And yeah, kind of the perfect amount of Jay and Bob in this book as well. Like I love Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back and Mallrats in the book and the stuff that they have more of a bigger role in and stuff. But this is a Clerks comic, so it's kind of the focus on Dante and Randall, and then they still have a little Jay and Silent Bob action going on in there as well.
Yeah, they're in the background.
All right, well, tell people where they can find you on the internets, Al.
All right, well, you can find me on one of two places right now, either on my own show, which is Resurrections and Adam Warlock and Thanos Podcast, which is all about the Marvel characters Adam Warlock and Thanos. I mean, it's right in the name. It's nothing really hidden. So just whatever podcatcher you use, just type in Adam Warlock or Thanos, and we're probably what's going to pop up first. And also, you can find me each week on the LEGION Podcast. You can find that on the Legion of Substitute Podcasters feed. That's about the late 80s, early 90s DC sci-fi book Legion. Not Legion of Superheroes, but the one with the acronym with Lobo.
Awesome. All right, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at BrodyMan34, and hopefully you can catch me back here pretty soon. Like Jesse's still kind of covered up with work, but I'm going to try and get some more Unspoken issues episodes up and keep up more of a regular schedule than we've had kind of over the summer where we've kind of been off kilter. But
hiatus. That's the word.
Yeah,
hiatus.
Exactly.
And you remind me, I forgot, on Twitter at Adam Thanos Pod.
Right.
I forgot about that part.
Cool. But until we can get back together again, I'll just say thanks to Dean Compton and Jesse Starcher at the Unspoken Decade, and also to the W2M Network for hosting us. Y'all be safe out there, and we'll catch you guys next time. Snookins.